The throne room of the Celestial Empire stretched for miles in every direction. Its walls were made of crystal that had been grown over millions of years. Light from distant stars passed through them and created rainbows that danced across the floor. Here, beings who had lived since the beginning of time gathered to discuss the fate of galaxies. Princess stood before the High Council. Her skin glowed with soft silver light, and her eyes held the colors of nebulas. She was 3,000 years old, which made her young by her people's standards. Her father, the Eternal Emperor, had ruled for over 100,000 years. Her grandmother still lived and remembered when their people first learned to travel between stars. The Celestials were not gods, but they were close enough. They could reshape planets with their thoughts. They could live forever unless violence took them. They had watched countless species rise and fall across the universe. They feared nothing. Until the Void Swarm came. The swarm was darkness given form. It came from the spaces between galaxies, from the cold emptiness where no light had ever reached. It consumed everything: stars, planets, entire civilizations. It had no mind that anyone could understand. It simply ate and grew and spread. The war had lasted 10,000 years. The Celestials had thrown everything they had against the swarm. They had sacrificed trillions of their kind. They had burned whole star systems to stop the swarm's advance. Nothing worked for long. The swarm always came back. It always grew stronger. Now, the council had gathered to discuss a desperate plan. "The humans have offered an alliance," said Elder Bora, the oldest of the council. His form flickered between solid and light, a sign of his immense age. "They propose a marriage between their military leader and one of the imperial family." Whispers filled the great hall. The Celestials knew of humans, of course. They had watched the small species evolve on a tiny blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. Humans had only discovered how to travel between stars 300 years ago. By celestial standards, they were infants. "Why would we accept such an offer?" asked another elder. "What can these short-lived creatures possibly offer us?" Elder Bora waved his hand and images appeared in the air. They showed a battle in a distant star system. Human ships, ugly things made of metal and fire, fought against the Void Swarm. The Celestials watched as the small vessels dove directly into the swarm's formations. They exploded with the force of small stars. The swarm pulled back. "In 40 years," Elder Bora said quietly, "the humans have reclaimed an entire sector from the swarm, a sector we lost 5,000 years ago." The hall fell silent. Stared at the images. She had fought the swarm herself. She knew how hard it was to make those creatures retreat. Her own sister had died in a battle that had gained them nothing. And these humans, these fragile beings who lived for less than a century, had done what her people could not. "How?" she asked. "That is what we must discover," her father said. The Eternal Emperor rose from his throne. He was ancient beyond measure, his form constantly shifting as he held back the weight of ages. "The humans have made their request clear. They want legitimacy. They want to be seen as equals. In exchange, they will share their methods with us." "And they want one of us to marry one of them," said. "Yes." Understood what was happening. She was the third daughter. She was not in line for the throne. She was expendable. The council would never allow her older sisters to marry outside their kind, but could be sacrificed for the war effort. She should have felt angry. Instead, she felt only tired. The war had taken everything from her people. If marrying a human could end it, then she would do her duty. "I will go," she said. The meeting with the human delegation took place on a neutral space station. Brought 100 attendants and wore robes that had been woven from starlight itself. She wanted to impress these humans, to show them the power of the Celestial Empire. The human delegation arrived in a single ship. It was battered and from battle. When the doors opened, only 5 humans walked out. Their leader was a man called. Had studied human appearances before the meeting. She knew they came in different colors and sizes. She knew they aged quickly and died easily. But seeing one in person was different. Was tall for a human but still shorter than. His hair was black, cut short in a military style. His skin was light brown, and his face carried lines around the eyes, marks of age, she knew, though he could not have been more than 40 years old. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations except for a small pin on his chest. What struck most were his eyes. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held no fear. When he looked at her, he did not bow or tremble. He simply met her gaze as if she were any other person. "Princess," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Commander," she replied, "you honor us with your presence." She expected him to be impressed by her radiance, by the show of power her attendance provided. Most species reacted with awe when they first saw a celestial. Some fell to their knees. Some wept. Simply nodded politely. "Shall we discuss the terms of our alliance?" he asked. They sat in a private chamber, just the two of them. Attendants had protested, but she wanted to understand this human without distractions. "You know what this marriage means," she said. "You will be bound to me for the rest of your life. You will leave your home and your people. You will never see your family again." "I have no family," said. "The swarm took them. My parents, my sister, my wife and daughter." His voice did not change as he spoke these words, but saw something shift in his eyes. "I have nothing left except the war." Felt a small crack in her certainty. She had assumed he wanted this marriage for glory or power. She had not considered that he might be driven by the same grief that drove her people. "I lost my sister to the swarm," she said. "She was 10,000 years old. She died holding a gate so that others could escape." Was quiet for a moment. "Then we understand each other." "Perhaps," studied him. "Tell me something, Commander. Your ships are small and weak compared to ours. Your people die so easily. How have you done what we could not? How have you pushed back the swarm?" Smiled. It was a strange expression. There was humor in it, but also something darker. "Do you know what happens when you push a human into a corner?" he asked. "When you take everything from them, when you give them no choice but to fight or die." "They fight." "They fight," agreed. "But more than that, they fight in ways that make no sense. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They find strength in their weakness. Your people have lived so long that you have learned to be careful. You protect what you have. You fear loss." He leaned forward. "Humans have nothing to lose, and that makes us very, very dangerous." Felt a chill run through her ancient heart. For the first time in her long life, she looked at a creature that should have been beneath her notice and felt something close to fear. "You speak of your own people as if they are weapons," she said. "We are weapons," said every single one of us, born into a universe that wanted to kill us, hardened by thousands of years of fighting each other. We learned to be dangerous before we even knew the stars existed. The marriage ceremony was held 1 month later. It was a small affair by celestial standards, only a few thousand guests. Wore white, the human color for weddings, wore his uniform. When they spoke the words that bound them together, felt the weight of her decision. She had married a creature who would die in decades. A creature who came from a species so young and small that the universe barely knew they existed. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something that her own ancient people had lost long ago. Hope. Humans hoped. They dreamed. They believed that tomorrow could be better than today. They did not accept the universe as it was. They fought to make it what they wanted it to be. Maybe that was why they could beat the swarm. Maybe that was why even the deities, who had created the celestials at the beginning of time, whispered warnings about the small species from Earth. Did not understand humans yet, but she was beginning to think that understanding them might be the most important thing she ever did. The wedding feast lasted for 3 days. When it was over and boarded a ship bound for the front lines. The war was waiting, and was about to learn just how terrifying her new husband's people could be. The human battleship was called the Iron Will. It was an ugly thing compared to celestial vessels. Whereas people built ships from living crystal that sang with the energy of stars, humans built theirs from dark metal and burning fuel. The corridors were narrow and smelled of oil and sweat. Everything made noise. The engines, the life support systems, even the walls seemed to hum and groan. Hated it at first, then she grew used to it. Then slowly she began to understand it. 3 months had passed since her wedding. She had spent most of that time on the Iron Will, traveling with to the front lines of the war. Along the way, she had watched humans do strange things. They ate meals together and laughed at jokes she did not understand. They played games with cards and dice. They sang songs about home, about love, about death. They also trained for battle every single day. Had seen soldiers before. Her own people had warriors who had fought for thousands of years, but human soldiers were different. They trained with a hunger that bordered on madness. They pushed their bodies until they broke, then healed and pushed again. They practiced killing in dozens of different ways, with guns, with blades, with their bare hands. "Why do they train so hard?" asked one evening. They stood on the observation deck, watching stars streak past as the ship traveled through faster-than-light space. "Because they are afraid," said. "They do not seem afraid. That is because they have learned to turn their fear into strength." Looked at her. "Your people do not fear death, do you? You have lived so long that dying seems almost impossible. Consider this. We fear the swarm, we fear the end of our civilization. But not personal death, not the end of yourself as an individual. No, when we die, we know our people will continue. Our memories are preserved in the crystal archives. In some ways, we never truly end." Nodded slowly. "Humans are different. When we die, we are gone. There is no archive, no continuation, just nothing. That is why we fear death so deeply." He paused. "And that is why we fight so hard to protect each other. Every human life is precious because it can never be replaced." The fleet arrived at the shattered system 3 days later. It had once been home to 6 inhabited worlds. Now it was a graveyard. The planets had been stripped down to their cores. The sun itself was dimming, its energy slowly being drained by the swarm. Stood on the bridge and stared at the destruction. She had seen similar sights before, but it never got easier. "How many people lived here?" she asked. 4 billion Celestials, said. 2 billion of other species who had taken refuge in your empire. They were all consumed." The void swarm floated in the darkness ahead. It looked like a living shadow, billions of individual creatures moving together like a single organism. Each creature was small, about the size of a human, but together they formed clouds that could block out stars. They had no eyes, no mouths, no organs that anyone could identify. They simply ate. They absorbed matter and energy and grew larger. Nothing could satisfy them. The celestial fleet had arrived first. 10,000 ships of living crystal, each one powered by the energy of captured stars. They were beautiful and terrible, weapons that had been perfected over millions of years. The human fleet came next. 300 ships of metal and fire. They looked like toys compared to the celestial vessels. Admiral led the celestial forces. She was old even by their standards, a warrior who had fought the swarm since the beginning. She contacted through the communication systems. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of their kind, "we are prepared to begin the standard engagement. Our ships will form a barrier while we bombard the swarm from a distance. This battle may take several months." "With respect," Admiral replied, "I propose a different strategy." He sent the battle plans to her ship. Watched Admiral's expression change from curiosity to disbelief to something that might have been horror. "You cannot be serious," the Admiral said. "I am completely serious." Looked at the plans on the screen in front of her. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. Then the reality hit her and she felt sick. had modified 100 of his ships. He had removed most of their weapons and crew quarters. He had filled them instead with explosive materials and unstable reactor cores. Each ship was now a massive bomb that would need to be flown directly into the heart of the swarm. "Those ships have crews," said quietly. Skeleton crews said, "Volunteers only, 20 people per ship." 2,000 people. Yes. You are asking them to die. Turned to face her. His expression was calm but could see the weight behind his eyes. "I am not asking them to die. I am asking them to kill. Their deaths are simply the price." The Admiral's voice came through again. "Commander, the Celestial Empire cannot support this plan. It is wasteful. It is brutal. It is." "Effective," interrupted. "Your fleet has been fighting the swarm for 10,000 years using the same strategies. You have achieved nothing but stalemate. My people have been fighting for 40 years and we have reclaimed an entire sector." He let that hang in the air. "Trust us, Admiral. Let us show you how humans wage war." The battle began at dawn. Not that there was any real dawn in space, but humans marked time that way anyway. Had asked to stay on the Iron Will. She wanted to see what would happen. She needed to understand. The celestial fleet moved first, forming a glowing wall of crystal between the swarm and the human ships. They began their bombardment, sending beams of pure starlight into the darkness. The swarm absorbed the attacks. It always did. The creatures simply ate the energy and grew stronger. Then the human ships moved. 100 vessels broke away from the main fleet. They accelerated toward the swarm at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Watched their signatures on the tactical display as they crossed the vast distance in minutes. The communication channels came alive with human voices. Expected to hear fear, crying, prayers. Instead, she heard something else entirely. Singing. The humans were singing. The songs were different from each ship. Some were slow and sad, some were fast and wild. One crew sang about a river, another sang about mountains. A third sang something that made the other humans on the bridge laugh even as tears ran down their faces. The first ship hit the swarm at full speed. The explosion was visible across the entire system, a flash of light brighter than the dying sun. The swarm recoiled. For a moment, there was a hole in the endless darkness. Then another ship hit, and another, and another. 100 ships, 2,000 humans, each one flying willingly into death, carrying enough explosives to crack a planet. The swarm screamed. Had never heard the creatures make any sound before, but now they screamed, a sound that traveled through space itself, vibrating through the hulls of every ship in the fleet. It was the sound of something ancient and terrible experiencing pain for the first time. The Celestials watched in stunned silence. They had fought the swarm for 10,000 years. They had never made it scream. When the last explosion faded, the swarm pulled back. It retreated into the outer darkness, leaving behind a field of debris and dying creatures. The system was clear. Found standing alone on the observation deck after the battle. His hands were shaking. His face was wet with tears. "You knew them," she said. "I knew all of them." His voice was barely a whisper. "Every single volunteer. I met with each one before the battle. I thanked them. I promised them their names would never be forgotten." "Why did they do it? Why did they agree to die?" Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steadier. "Because they had families who were still alive, children, parents, lovers. They knew that if the swarm was not stopped here, it would reach human space in 20 years. Everything they loved would be consumed." He turned to face. "They did not die for glory or honor. They died so that the people they loved could live." Tried to imagine one of her own people doing such a thing, volunteering to end their eternal existence for the sake of others. She could think of a few who might. Her sister had died protecting others after all. But 2,000, all at once, cheerfully. "Your people are terrifying," she said. Yes, agreed, we are. The victory at the shattered system spread quickly through both empires. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Celestials had won a decisive battle against the swarm. The humans had shown them how. But for the battle had changed something deeper. She had thought of humans as fragile creatures who needed protection. Now she understood the truth. Humans were not fragile. They were glass, and glass could become a blade sharper than any steel. She looked at her husband with new eyes. This man who would die in decades. This man who commanded people to throw away their lives without hesitation. This man who wept for every death he ordered. He was more dangerous than any celestial who had ever lived, and was beginning to realize that she had only seen the smallest glimpse of what humans were capable of. 6 months after the battle of the shattered system, the Celestial Council summoned home. They wanted answers. They wanted to understand how a species barely out of its infancy had accomplished what the ancient Celestials could not. Was happy to leave the front lines, at least for a while. She needed time to think. She needed to process everything she had witnessed. She left with his fleet and traveled back to the Celestial alone. The journey took 2 weeks. She spent most of that time reading. The humans had given her access to their historical archives. At first, had found them confusing. Human history was so short compared to her people's, barely 10,000 years of recorded civilization. What could they possibly have to teach beings who remembered the birth of stars? Everything, it turned out, started with the wars. Humans had been fighting each other since before they developed writing. They fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. The numbers were staggering. In a single century, the 20th by their calendar, humans had killed over 100 million of their own kind in wars. But the methods were what truly horrified her. Humans had developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They called them nuclear bombs. They had used them on each other. Twice. On population centers filled with civilians, men, women, children, elderly, all burned to ash in an instant. They had created poisons that could kill millions if released into the air. Chemical weapons, they called them. They had used those too. They had engineered diseases, sicknesses designed to spread through populations and kill as many as possible. Biological warfare. Some human governments had developed strains that could have ended their entire species if released. Stopped reading several times. She had to walk away to breathe, to remind herself that these creatures were now her allies. Her husband was one of them. But she forced herself to continue. She needed to understand. The wars were not the only thing she studied. She read about human art and music. She read their poetry and philosophy. She watched recordings of their performances, people dancing, singing, acting out stories for audiences of thousands. She read about their capacity for love. Humans formed bonds with each other that were so strong they would die to protect them. Parents for children, friends for friends, lovers for each other, strangers for strangers sometimes. Humans had walked into burning buildings to save people they had never met. The contradiction confused her. How could a species be capable of such cruelty and such kindness at the same time? How could they build weapons to destroy everything and then create art that celebrated life? She brought this question to the council when she arrived. The meeting was held in the same great hall where had agreed to the marriage. The elders sat in a circle around her, their ancient forms flickering with concern. "You have lived among them for 6 months," Elder Bora said. "Tell us what you have learned." Took a deep breath. "Humans are chaos," she said. "They hold within themselves the capacity for unlimited destruction and unlimited creation. They can build civilizations in centuries that we took millions of years to develop. They can also tear those civilizations down overnight." "That sounds unstable," another elder said. "Dangerous." "It is dangerous, but it is also their greatest strength." Called up images from her research, paintings, music recordings, architectural marvels from Earth. Look at what they create. In less than 10,000 years, they went from living in caves to splitting atoms. They developed mathematics, philosophy, art, science. They explored their entire planet and then reached out into space. We did the same things, an elder pointed out. It simply took us longer. No, said firmly. You do not understand. We did those things because we had time. We had millions of years to grow and learn. We were never in danger. We never faced true extinction. She paused. Humans do everything at a sprint because they know they are dying. Every single one of them. Every moment of their existence is a race against death. The council was silent. The void swarm is entropy, continued. It consumes, it destroys, it returns everything to nothing. It is the end of the universe made flesh. She looked at each elder in turn. Humans are also entropy, but they are entropy that fights back against itself. They destroy, yes, but they also build. They tear down, but they also create. They die, but they leave behind children and art and ideas that live on after them. You are saying humans are a force of nature, Elder Bora said slowly. I am saying humans are the only force of nature that chooses its direction. They can burn everything to ash, or they can fill the void with light. Right now, they have chosen to fight alongside us. If we are wise, we will learn everything we can from them while we have the chance. Elder Bora leaned forward. And if they choose differently, if they decide we are their enemies instead of their allies? Felt a chill run through her. She had thought about this question many times during her journey home. Then we will die, she said simply. Not quickly, perhaps, not easily, but eventually. If humans ever turn their full attention to destroying the celestial empire, we will not survive. They are too creative, too adaptable, too willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The council fell into worried silence. That night walked alone through the crystal gardens of her childhood home. The flowers here were made of living light, grown from seeds planted 10 million years ago. They would bloom forever, unchanging, eternal. She found herself missing the ugly metal corridors of the iron will. She missed the smell of human food cooking in the mess hall. She missed the sound of laughter and argument and music. She missed. The realization surprised her. She had married him for duty, not love. But somewhere along the way she had begun to care for him. Not romantically, not yet, but she worried about him. She wanted him to be safe. Was this how humans felt all the time? This constant awareness of mortality, this desperate need to protect the people they cared about. No wonder they fought so hard. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. You think of him. Turned to find her grandmother standing nearby. The Ancient One was old beyond counting, one of the first Celestials to ever exist. Her form was barely visible, more suggestion than substance. Yes, admitted, I think of my husband. Tell me about him. Considered how to describe. He is kind. He cares deeply about his people. He carries the weight of every life lost under his command. He is a warrior. Yes, a good one. Perhaps the best his people have ever produced. The Ancient One drifted closer. And yet you say his people are terrifying, that they could destroy us if they chose. Both things are true. Humans contain multitudes. They are capable of anything. That is why the deities fear them. Looked at her grandmother sharply. The deities, you have spoken with them about humans. I have listened to them speak. The Ancient One's form flickered with old memories. Long ago, before your grandfather was born, the deities gathered to discuss a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. A new species had evolved there, fragile creatures that lived brief lives and died without trace. Humans. Yes, the deities watched them for 10,000 years. They saw the wars and the cruelty. They also saw the love and the creation. They debated what to do. Some wanted to destroy the humans before they could spread beyond their world. Others wanted to uplift them, to guide their development. What did they decide? They decided to do nothing. They were afraid. stared at her grandmother. The deities were the creators of everything, beings of pure cosmic law who existed before time itself. They had made the celestials to be their hands in the physical universe. They were beyond fear. Afraid of what? Asked. Afraid of what humans might become if they were pushed. Afraid of what they might create if they were threatened. Afraid of what they might destroy if they had nothing left to lose. The Ancient One's voice dropped to a whisper. The deities looked at humans and saw something they had never seen before, a species that could genuinely surprise them, a species that might one day grow beyond their control. Thought of the battle of the shattered system. 2,000 humans flying willingly into death, singing as they went. She thought of the weapons humans had created to use on each other. She thought of the art they had made to celebrate life. The deities were right to be afraid, she said. Perhaps, or perhaps fear is the wrong response. The Ancient One began to fade back into the light. Fear is what the swarm inspires. All respect, caution. These are what humans deserve. They are young and they are dangerous, and they may one day surpass everything we have ever achieved. What should we do? Learn from them, not just their tactics but their spirit. We have lived so long that we have forgotten how to truly live. Humans burn bright because they know they will burn out. Perhaps that is not a weakness. Perhaps that is the most profound wisdom in the universe. The Ancient One vanished, leaving alone in the garden. She stayed there until morning, thinking about everything she had learned. When the sun rose over the crystal flowers, she made a decision. She would return to and the human fleet. She would fight alongside them until the war was won or until she died trying. And she would learn everything the humans could teach her about how to live as if every moment mattered. Because for the first time in 3,000 years, felt something she had thought lost forever. Hope. 2 years had passed since married, 2 years of war, of victory, of loss. The combined human celestial fleet had reclaimed 900 star systems from the void swarm. The darkness was retreating for the first time in 10,000 years. But victory came with a price that struggled to comprehend. Humans died by the millions. Every battle cost them thousands of lives. Every victory was paid for in blood and fire and sacrifice. They did not have the regeneration abilities of the Celestials. They could not transfer their consciousness to new bodies. When a human died, they were simply gone, erased from the universe as if they had never existed. And still they came. Stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching a new fleet arrive from Earth. Fresh ships, fresh crews, fresh volunteers ready to throw their lives away for a cause they believed in. "How many is that this month?" she asked. Lieutenant Minu checked his display. He was young, barely 25, and had already lost his right arm in a battle 6 months ago. The replacement was mechanical, but he never complained. 50,000 new recruits, plus another 30,000 from the colony worlds. Where do they find them all? How do they convince so many people to come here and die? Minu looked at her with the quiet patience she had come to associate with humans. Nobody convinces them, princess. They volunteer, every single one. But why? Because their children will live in a galaxy without the swarm. Because their names will be remembered. Because dying for something matters more than living for nothing. Shook her head. She had heard explanations like this many times, but she still did not fully understand. Her people valued survival above all else. They protected their long lives with careful strategy and measured risk. The human approach, spending lives like currency, seemed wasteful and brutal. And yet it worked. The door opened and walked in. He looked tired, more tired than she had ever seen him. 2 years of constant warfare had aged him visibly. Gray had crept into his hair. Lines had deepened around his eyes. "The scientists have finished their calculations," he said. "We found a way to end this war." The meeting was held in a secure chamber deep within a human space station. Celestial and human leaders gathered around a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. In the center of the map, marked in red, was the dark threshold, the point where the void swarm entered their universe. General led the briefing. She was a woman of about 50, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by decades of combat. Had met her several times and always felt slightly uncomfortable in her presence. Had lost 3 of her children to the war. She had buried them herself when their bodies were recovered, and she still fought on. The swarm does not originate in our universe, said. We have known this for centuries. It comes from somewhere else, a dimension of pure void, pure hunger. The dark threshold is the doorway between our reality and theirs. We have tried to close that doorway before, Admiral said. We threw everything we had at it 10,000 years ago. Nothing worked. You did not have this, gestured, and the display changed to show a device about the size of a small spacecraft. Our scientists, working with your engineers, have developed a singularity bomb. It does not destroy the threshold. It collapses it inward, sealing the breach between dimensions permanently. Study the design. This could work. It will work, said. The mathematics are certain. Once activated, the bomb will create a self-sustaining collapse that will seal the threshold forever. The swarm will be cut off from its source. No more reinforcements, no more regeneration. We can hunt down the remaining creatures at our leisure. Then why are we waiting? Asked. Build the bomb and deploy it. His expression did not change. There is a complication. The bomb must be detonated from inside the threshold. The device needs to be carried through the breach and activated manually on the other side. The room fell silent. On the other side, Admiral repeated slowly, in the dimension of the swarm itself. Yes, the radiation from the collapse will kill any organic being within seconds. Whoever carries the bomb through will not survive. Looked around the room. Every human face was calm, thoughtful, considering. Not one of them seemed surprised or disturbed. It was as if they had expected this all along. You are asking for a volunteer, she said. We are asking for volunteers, corrected. Plural. We have already received 10,000 applications. 10,000. 10,000 humans willing to die to end the war forever. Felt the familiar mixture of awe and horror that she had come to associate with her husband's people. Spoke quietly, I will be among them. Turned to face him, no. It is my duty. I am the commander of the human forces. I will not ask my people to do what I am not willing to do myself. You are my husband. You are needed here. You are, stopped herself. She was about to say too important, but she saw the look on his face and understood that this argument would not work. Humans did not believe anyone was too important to sacrifice. I have lived a good life, said. I have fought well. I have loved and been loved. If my death can end this war, it will be worth it. The selection process took 3 days. Spent most of that time trying to convince to withdraw his application. She failed. In the end, the honor went to a young pilot named Sora. She was 20 years old, barely more than a child by celestial standards. She had bright eyes and a quick smile, and she laughed easily at jokes that did not understand. Sora had volunteered because her parents were farmers on a colony world near the front lines. If the war continued, the swarm would reach them within 5 years. She did not want her family to die. Are you afraid? Asked her the night before the mission. Sora thought about it seriously. Yes, she said finally. I am afraid of the pain. I am afraid of being alone in that place in the dark. I am afraid that it will not work, that my death will be meaningless. Then why do it? Because someone has to, and if not me, then who? Someone else's daughter, someone else's sister. Sora shook her head. No, I would rather it be me. At least this way I know the person who has to die, and I know she was brave. The next morning, the combined fleet gathered at the dark threshold. It hung in space like a wound in reality. a tear in the fabric of the universe through which darkness poured endlessly into their galaxy. Sora's ship was small and fast, designed for speed rather than survival. She would need to fly through the threshold, past the swarm's defenses, and reach the center of the breach before activating the bomb. The entire human fleet would escort her as far as they could. The battle was the largest in the war's history. Tens of thousands of ships clashed with the endless tide of the swarm. Celestial vessels burned with starlight. Human ships exploded in bursts of fire and fury. Stood on the bridge of the Iron Will next to, watching the madness unfold. She could hear the communication channels, human voices shouting orders, calling encouragement, singing songs of home and hope. She could also hear Sora. The young pilot's voice came through clear and steady as she approached the threshold. "I can see it," she said. "It is so dark, so cold." A pause, "but I am not afraid anymore." "You are doing well," Sora said. "The whole galaxy is watching. The whole galaxy is grateful. Tell my parents I love them. Tell them I am coming home, just not the way they expected." Sora's ship crossed the threshold. The sensors tracked her for a few more seconds, a small light moving into infinite darkness. Then the signal cut out. 3 seconds later, the threshold collapsed. The effect was visible across the entire system. The tier in reality folded inward, pulling the darkness with it. The swarm creatures near the breach were sucked back into their own dimension. The rest, cut off from their source, began to weaken and die. For the first time in 10,000 years, the war was over. Did not celebrate. She stood in silence, thinking of a young woman who had laughed easily and loved her parents and flown into darkness so that others could live in light. The memorial service was held 1 week later. Every human in the fleet gathered to honor Sora and the millions of others who had died fighting the swarm. Gave the eulogy. His voice was steady but could see the tears on his face. Sora was 20 years old, he said. She liked to sing. She was terrible at card games. She always saved part of her dessert to share with her friends. She dreamed of becoming a teacher after the war. He paused. She will never grow old. She will never marry or have children. She will never stand in sunlight on her home world again. All of that was taken from her, by the swarm, by the war, by fate. But she did not die as a victim. She died as a hero. She died so that every child in the galaxy could grow up without fear. The humans bowed their heads. The Celestials watched in respectful silence. "This is what it means to be human," continued. "We are small, we are brief, we are fragile, but when we love something, we will burn ourselves to ash to protect it. That is our gift and our curse. That is why we win wars that cannot be won. That is why the darkness fears us." He looked up at the stars. "Rest now, Sora. You have earned it. And know this, your name will never be forgotten. Not as long as a single human draws breath. Not as long as the stars remember what you did here today." The service ended with a song. Had heard humans sing many times, but this was different. This was not a battle hymn or a drinking song. This was pure grief transformed into beauty, thousands of voices raised together in farewell. When it was over, found herself crying. She had not cried in 1,000 years. Found her later, standing alone on the observation deck. He did not say anything. He simply stood beside her and watched the stars. "I understand now," said finally, "why the deities fear your kind, why the swarm fled from you, why even death itself cannot stop you." "Why?" asked. "Because you love too much. You love so deeply and so completely that you would give everything, your lives, your futures, your very existence, to protect what you love. The universe has never seen anything like that before. It does not know how to fight against love that strong." Was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, a sad, tired smile, but genuine. "Maybe that is the secret," he said. "Not strength, not intelligence, not technology, just love. Simple, stubborn, impossible love." Took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily since their wedding. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me how to love like that." Looked at her with surprised, hopeful eyes. "It starts with accepting that everything ends," he said, "and then loving anyway." Nodded. It was a hard lesson, perhaps the hardest she would ever learn. But she was ready to begin. Died on a warm summer evening, 43 years after the war ended. He was 82 years old. His hair had turned completely white, and his strong body had grown thin and frail. But his eyes still held the same quiet fire that had seen on the day they first met. She was by his side when he took his final breath. She held his hand as his heart slowed and stopped. She watched the light leave his eyes, that spark of life and love and endless stubbornness that made humans so remarkable. And then he was gone. Had known this day would come. She had known it from the moment she agreed to marry him. Humans were brief candles, burning bright and fast. There was never any chance they would grow old together. But knowing did not make the loss easier to bear. The funeral was attended by thousands. Had become a legend in the decades after the war, the human commander who had taught the ancient Celestials how to fight. His face was carved into monuments on 100 worlds. His name was spoken with reverence by species across the galaxy. But too, he was simply her husband, the man who had taught her to laugh at small things, the man who had shown her that every moment was precious because every moment could be the last, the man who had loved her completely, without reservation, even knowing that she would outlive him by thousands of years. After the funeral, returned to the observation deck where they had spent so many hours together. She stood in the darkness and watched the stars and tried to make sense of the emptiness inside her. She lived for another 8,000 years after his death. She watched humanity spread across the galaxy like wildfire. They settled new worlds, built new civilizations, created wonders that amazed even the ancient Celestials. They developed technologies that bent the laws of physics. They produced art that moved entire species to tears. They made mistakes and learned from them and made new mistakes and kept going. They never stopped surprising her. In the third millennium after the war, human scientists achieved something that had seemed impossible. They found a way to reverse entropy in a closed system. They had discovered the key to true immortality, not the managed longevity of the Celestials, but genuine, eternal life. The news spread through the galaxy like shockwaves. Every species watched to see what the humans would do. Would they become immortal? Would they join the ranks of the eternal? Traveled to Earth to witness the decision. The Great Council of Humanity met in a vast amphitheater under an open sky. Billions of humans watched through broadcast systems as their leaders debated the choice before them. The chief advocate for immortality was a young politician named. He was passionate and persuasive, speaking of all the knowledge and experience that would be preserved if humans lived forever. "Think of what we could achieve," he said. "No more death, no more loss. Every scientist, every artist, every teacher could work for thousands of years instead of decades. We could build paradise itself." The hall erupted in cheering. It seemed obvious to that humans would accept this gift. Who would choose death when life was offered? But then another voice rose to speak. Her name she was old, over 90, and she walked slowly to the speaking platform. But when she began to talk, the entire hall fell silent. "I have lived a long life," said. "I have loved and lost. I have seen children born and buried friends. I have experienced more joy and more sorrow than I once believed possible." She looked out at the crowd. "Would I live longer if I could? Of course. Every moment is precious, but would I live forever?" She shook her head. "Immortality is not a gift. It is a cage. Look at the Celestials. They have lived for millions of years and they grew so careful, so afraid of loss that they forgot how to truly live. They needed us, brief, fragile, dying, to remind them that existence has meaning only because it ends." The hall was completely silent. Death is not our enemy, continued. Death is our teacher. It is what makes every moment precious. It is what gives us the courage to love completely, to risk everything, to burn bright instead of merely glowing. Take away death, and you take away the fire that makes us human. She paused. I am dying. In a few years I will be gone, but I have children and they have children and they will carry my memory forward. I have written books that will be read for centuries. I have touched lives that will touch other lives in ways I cannot imagine. I am not ending. I am becoming part of something larger than myself. Looked directly at the broadcast cameras. That is immortality. Not living forever, but living in a way that matters. Not clinging to existence, but giving ourselves to something greater. That is the human way. That is what we must never lose. The vote was held the following day. By a margin of 60 to 40, humanity chose to remain mortal. Met with after the council concluded. They sat together in a garden on Earth, a real garden, with green plants and flowing water and insects buzzing in the warm air. Why, asked, you could have lived forever, you could have become like my people. Smiled, it was a peaceful smile, without fear or regret. Your people are beautiful, she said. They are wise and powerful and ancient, but they have forgotten something that we still understand. What? That the stars burn just before they fade, that endings are not defeats, that the only things that give beginnings meaning are the endings that follow. Took's hand. You have lived for thousands of years. Have you ever truly been happy? Thought about the question. She thought about her long existence, the wars she had fought, the losses she had suffered, the slow accumulation of years. Once, she said finally, I was happy with during the years of our marriage before he died. I was happy then. Why? Because I knew it could not last. Because every moment was precious. Because I was learning to love like a human loves, completely, desperately, without holding anything back. Nodded, that is the gift we give the universe, not our achievements or our victories, just this, the ability to love something so much that its loss can break us, and then to keep loving anyway. She thought of Sora, flying into darkness. She thought of all the humans who had given their brief lives so that others could live. Do you really believe your mortality makes you stronger? She asked. I believe it makes us real, said. Everything else in the universe just exists. Stars burn without feeling. Galaxies spin without purpose. Even the deities simply are. But humans, we choose. We love, we hope, we fear, we fight. We know we will die and we create meaning anyway. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing in all of creation. Returned to the Celestial that night. She stood before the Eternal Council and proposed something that had never been considered in all the millions of years of celestial history. She proposed that her people learn to die. The debate lasted for a century. There were arguments and counter-arguments. There were those who called her mad, those who called her a traitor to their kind. Some demanded she be stripped of her title and exiled. But was patient. She had learned patience from watching humans, who achieved in decades what her people could not accomplish in. In the end, the council agreed. It would be gradual, of course. The Celestials would not simply stop living. Instead, they would allow themselves to age slowly over thousands of years. They would learn to accept endings. They would learn to love things that could be lost. They would learn to be mortal. The first celestial death came 3,000 years later. It was Elder Bora, the oldest of the council, who chose to go first. He gathered his family around him, children and in great spanning dozens of generations, and he told them that he was tired. I have lived long enough, he said. I have seen everything I wanted to see. Now I want to rest. He closed his eyes and let go of the cosmic energies that sustained his form. His light flickered, faded, and went out. For the first time in celestial history, there was a funeral. Was present when it happened. She stood among the mourners and felt the strange mixture of grief and pride that humans experienced when they lost someone they loved. She understood now. She understood why humans were feared by deities and monsters alike. She understood why they could do impossible things, why they never stopped fighting, why they created such beauty and such horror in equal measure. It was because they knew the truth that immortals had forgotten. Existence was not a gift to be preserved. It was a fire to be shared. And the flames were the ones that burned out. In the final years of her life, for she had decided to age and die like the humans she admired, wrote her memoirs. She called them Reflections on Humanity. In the final chapter, she wrote this: "They came from a small world with a short history and shorter lives. They should have been nothing. Instead, they became everything, not by conquering the universe, but by teaching it how to be mortal. I have lived for 11,000 years. I have witnessed the rise and fall of empires. I have seen stars born and die. But the most important thing I ever learned came from a species that barely lasted a century. They taught me that love matters more than survival. That meaning matters more than duration. That the purpose of existence is not to continue forever, but to burn bright enough that the universe never forgets you were here. I will die soon. My light will fade and I will become part of the darkness between stars, but I am not afraid. Because of humans, I learned how to live. And because I learned how to live, I know how to die. Thank you, Sora. Thank you. Thank you to every brief, brilliant human who showed me that endings are not defeats. You were the best teachers I ever had. And I will carry your lessons with me into whatever comes next." Closed her eyes for the last time on a quiet evening, surrounded by family and friends who loved her. Her last thought was of smiling at her across a crowded observation deck, his dark eyes full of hope. She was going home at last,